City of Wichita wishes to update you on our recovery from and preparations for the winter storms that we're entering into the second one of today. Overnight, Sunday evening, we were able to resupply our road material with straight sand. We received 1,800 tons of straight sand to supplement our salt sand mix that remains. The cost of that 1,800 tons was just over $16,000 for the sand. The storm last week, we consumed about 4,800 tons of salt sand mix. That salt sand mix has a cost of almost $119,000. These are material only costs. They're the costs that are currently available for the last storm and preparations for this storm. Once the event's over, we'll do a full cost accounting. Overnight, we found the winter storm warning that we were under replaced with a blizzard warning. The blizzard warning indicates that for periods in excess of 3 hours, we will have visibilities of less than a quarter of a mile, wind speeds in excess of 35 miles per hour, and heavy snow. At this point, that snow part of the storm is arriving later than expected. The rain event is lasting longer. That could impact totals. However, it's still possible that we may get 13 inches or so of snow, depending on when it cuts over from rain and mix to straight snow. The blizzard warning goes until noon on Tuesday. The wind conditions, even after the snow event stops, may cause additional travel troubles in terms of blowing snow back onto the roadway after we have cleared them. Our strategy for this next storm, because it's going to be intense snow, we anticipate that we will be primarily plowing. We will use the straight sand that we secured last night to spot treat as necessary, but we are going to conserve our salt sand mix until the end of the active snow event, when applying it will be most effective. We urge drivers to continue to monitor weather conditions and to adjust their travel plans as appropriate depending on when and how the storm develops. The city took a short break from active treatment on Sunday as we finished our cleanup work from the last storm, but as of 6 p.m. Sunday evening, we're back to 24-hour snow emergency operations. We're operating two 12-hour shifts with 50 operators and 50 pieces of equipment on each of those two shifts. We will remain in 24-hour operations until the snow event is over and until we have the streets back to normal conditions. Citizens are reminded that it is their responsibility under city ordinance to provide for the clearance of sidewalks, drives, and parking lots to ensure public safety. Happy to answer questions.
Joe, that sand that came in last night, where do you order that from?
The sand that we received last night was provided by Cornejo and Sons. It is produced locally and was available. The salt sand combination is mixed by a vendor locally, but the salt comes out of Hutchinson, and it's that salt that is hard to get on resupply this time of year with a lot of competing state DOTs as well as local governments requesting salt.
Joe, how are your crews holding up through all of this? I mean, they're getting enough sleep, that sort of thing?
Working a 12-hour on, 12-hour off shift is very difficult, and as we move into the second week of that, we continue to encourage our employees to use the 12-hour off time to productively recuperate so that they're ready for service when they come back on duty. And I'm proud to say that that's what they've been doing, and as a result, we have had safe operations through this event so far.
I'm sorry, Tim.
Excuse me, you said last week you consumed about 4,800 tons of salt sand mix. and that cost almost $119,000.
That is correct.
And what you received yesterday was cost just over $16,000.
Right. That was 1,800 tons of straight sand.
When you do the full accounting, that'll include overtime, which is there's going to be a significant amount of overtime for this, of course, right?
It will include overtime that is attributable to the snowstorm. Again, this is an unprecedented event. Typically, a typical Wichita winter snowstorm, we're able to, on many cases, adjust shifts and adjust work hours so that we aren't paying very much, if any, overtime. This one, it just keeps coming.
Joe, is this something you guys budget for every year?
There is a snow and ice budget that's in the city's adopted budget each year. It was increased recently, increased for this year compared to the past years. It is not an amount in which we base operations. In other words, in most budgets, if you're out of budget, you have to stop doing whatever it is you're doing. We wouldn't do that. We would continue to operate, and then after the fact, we would go through the city council to get a budget adjustment to realign the expenditures.
Joe, talk a little bit about the difference between the last storm and the one that's coming.
The biggest difference between last week's storm and the one that we're about to encounter today is the wind. With the increased wind that we're expecting in this storm, we're going to face the probability of, even after the snowfall is over, we could have what is defined as a ground blizzard, which is so much snow blowing that it seems like it's still coming down, even though the actual precipitation has ended.
And in town, when we have that kind of wind with snow, does it drift still across the streets, or do the buildings help block that?
In town, we'll still have a lot of areas that will have problems with drift because of the wind. The problems will not be the same as they would be out in the rural areas, but we definitely will face that problem. At this point, primarily on the east-west streets, because the wind direction is forecast out of the north.
We've received a couple different emails saying that you guys are out of diesel. Can you tell us what your diesel supplies are and what you do to replenish them?
Absolutely. Regarding diesel fuel supplies, when the storm hit last week, on Tuesday, our suppliers stopped making deliveries of diesel fuel. As a result of that, over the weekend, diesel supplies did drop lower than they would normally be in our inventory. By working through the different sites that we have for not only Public Works and Utilities, but Wichita Transit and other sites within the city organization, we were able to meet the demand that we had for diesel fuel, and then we were able to get resupply on that diesel fuel that began last night and is continuing today to get filled up before the next storm.
You don't anticipate running out of diesel then?
No, we do not anticipate running out of diesel or unleaded.
Could you explain again, with this wind out of the north, the streets that are most vulnerable to drifting would be the east-west streets?
Correct. And you can just think of that as simply as the snow being blown that we've plowed and that is falling off the street being blown onto the street by the wind.
And why not use a salt and sand? Why just the sand?
Okay. The reason that we're using our straight sand during these initial phases of the operation is because we are going to be anticipating being in a continuous plowing mode because there's going to be so much snow that comes down. As a result of that, if we put sand down where needed for traction, as we plow, if we're moving just the sand off of the roadway, we're still going to be conserving that salt sand mix for the end where we will no longer be plowing, and therefore that salt sand will stay down and be beneficial on the driving lanes.